Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. I'm Steven Browne and I'm delighted to say joining me now to discuss everything to do with Bradford City, it is the TNA's Simon Parker. Simon, how are you doing, mate?
Not bad, Steve, not bad.
Feels like it's been a while since we spoke, and I think the last time we had you on the show, it was before the Hartlepool and Carlisle double bill.
Yeah.
And we were talking about what an opportunity it was to get closer to those automatic places. Not quite worked out that way, has it, Simon?
No, I mean, you said about what an opportunity. They had some great opportunities in that Hartlepool game, didn't they? You look back and, I think Mark Hughes said it should have been 6-3 afterwards, and he probably wasn't far off. I mean, there was some big chances missed, and if you do that, you're not going to win, are you? So that was frustrating. I think Carlisle, as a contrast, I really enjoyed it. I mean, people look at it and think cagey 0-0, shots on target were at a premium. I think it was one each, but it had the feel of a playoff game. It was a real promotion battle, two teams up there, and it was sort of played at 100 miles an hour, full commitment, and they gave it a right go second half. And at Andy Cook's header, Andy Cook's shot, it was very well defended actually to get a little touch on it to put it onto the bar, and then right at the end, Jordan Gibson almost, sort of bringing the house down by scoring at Valley Parade. He hits the inside of the post. It was sort of one of those encounters, and you got away from it, sort of thinking, "Blimey, that was a real heavyweight slugfest out there," and it had the feel of a two teams, could go the distance. And as I said in the report that night, I wouldn't be too surprised if those two teams meet again. It was one of those sort of games. So I think it tees up what's remaining of this season.
Yeah, because it's 4 back-to-back draws, and it's like, I think Mark Hughes described it as like a cycle of draws at the moment. And is the feeling of frustration and missed opportunity, or after that Carlisle game, is it actually with the break a chance to actually reset a little bit?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think the frustration was more with Hartlepool than Carlisle. I think you look back on Carlisle and think that was a decent point against a good side, but when you look at the form of the teams up in the top 7, I mean, Leyton Orient, obviously they've got a nice cushion at the top. Their form's identical. Stevenage have taken the same number of points over the last 5 games. I think it's only Northampton who've taken 13 points out of 15 and put a real charge in, who've really made a sort of a big surge in that time. There's a lot of nerves kicking in, and people dropping points where you wouldn't expect it to. But obviously, it does tee up these games now, because you go into every game thinking, well, if you don't win, you're going to be losing a lot of ground here. But, because obviously opportunities are start to run out.
Yeah, absolutely. And after the weekend, City didn't play. How's the table looking in your mind? How do you think it's lining up going into this weekend's games?
Not too bad. I think that there was a couple of frustrating results, but the real bonus was seeing Carlisle get beat in stoppage time at Gillingham. It was a bit of a punch to the air Saturday afternoon moment when you saw that goal pop up on Soccer Saturday. But City needed a break like that, because I think obviously, Stockport and Salford getting results. They couldn't afford everybody to pick up something. They needed someone to fall, and obviously Stevenage, were playing, a rival. But in terms of the gap, keeping it at 6, I think, going into the last 9 games, and they've got that game in hand on everyone bar Stevenage immediately above them. So, it's down to winning games, not drawing them now, isn't it? And sort of making those opportunities count.
How nice is it at this stage of the season, though? There's still so much to play for. That's always a good feeling as a football fan, isn't it? When your team's got something at least to fight for.
Yeah, it's been far too long. I mean, we were thinking, it's 2017 was the last time City were in a promotion race, and at that stage, you got used to it, because that was Stuart McCall's season. The season before that, Phil Parkinson had taken them to the playoffs. Season before that, obviously the Great FA Cup run where they dipped out at the end. They probably ran out of steam. But, there was always something to play for. And then suddenly, obviously, the disastrous relegation season in 2018-19. And since any time you've sort of got a bit excited about what might be in a season, it's sort of faded by March. So it's quite nice that you get into this sort of closing stages and you're still very much in the hunt, and it does make for very nervous viewing. And obviously you end up sort of, scratching your head with every possible formula of results elsewhere. But it's nice to be bothered about other people's results. When you're 15th, you couldn't give 2 hoots what 6th to get doing, could you? So it's nice that results elsewhere affect you, because it's been far too long.
Yeah, and what do you think City need to do to turn these draws into wins then going forward?
Score goals.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's simple as that. It's.
yeah,
I mean, defensively, that team has been excellent. Obviously, they've let in the odd soft goal here and there, but generally the defence has been excellent. 16 clean sheets in the league in 37 games is a great record. And considering that they didn't start the season particularly well on clean sheets, I mean, the run they've had since the turn of the year defensively has been superb. But it's obviously at the other end, which we've said from day one. Andy Cook has been scoring ridiculously well, but someone's got to pick up the slack. It's a bit of a stuck record moment. You see the second top scorers on 4, and then you've got a defence that hasn't contributed a single goal. And whereas the likes of Carlisle I think they've got 12 or 13 defensive goals, and City have got none. And that's a huge. That's worth another 5 points, isn't it? Centre halves getting on the end of corners and free kicks. And because you're always worried, should Andy Cook pick up an injury or suddenly stops 5 games, which, God forbid. I think we pray every night that never happens. But at the moment, he's in terms of them going forward, he's carrying the goal output single-handed, isn't he? And he desperately needs someone to ease the load a little bit. If they can do that, then there's no reason why they certainly won't be in the top 7, and you wouldn't rule out the top 3.
No, absolutely. How smart does that little break that he got given earlier in the season look now, though? The fact that he looks raring to go every game. Do you think that's kind of benefited long term? Because, like you say, if he was injured, you'd be really struggling to see where the goals would come from.
Well, I think so. I mean, he obviously that was at the stage of the season when it was getting a bit bitty, wasn't it? Going into December, they weren't playing a lot, but Andy Cook's form it tailed off. City's form tailed off. He wasn't scoring goals. They had a couple of dodgy results, and then the game at Carlisle on Boxing Day when they came back after I think 3 weeks out, he missed 2 very presentable chances. By his standards, they were big chances. And at that point, as you say, Mark Hughes pulled the plug and said, "Look, let's give you a breather, take you out the firing line." I mean, he still brought him on every game, and at the time, obviously, people outside were going, "What the hell are they doing, taking their by far top scorer out the team?" But you've seen his response. I think he scored. I think it's 9 goals in 11, possibly 12 starts since. He's just been scoring regularly. He's been playing at the top of his game, and he looks like a player refreshed, and perhaps wanted to prove to his manager that he is the best player out there. And it's in hindsight, it looks a managerial masterstroke, doesn't it? But so we just hope he keeps it going because if he keeps firing, then City are still very much in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you kind of worked out, I know you've written an article on it this week, but in terms of the number of points City would need for automatic and how many wins that's going to require, does it seem feasible?
It's a tricky, I mean, if you look at the last 10 or 11 years, I mean, I think, third place last year, Bristol Rovers was 80 points. I mean, last year was very tight. I mean, it was 3rd to 7th was separated by 3 points. So that was, that was up in the air for quite a long time. And obviously, the last day of the season, you had that, farcical result where they overhauled Northampton. But before that, the average tends to be around about 82 points from automatic. And if you think 61 City currently, that's 21. That's 7 wins out of 9. Easy. I mean, realistically, they've got to get to 80, haven't they? It's probably quite difficult to tell because I think I asked Mark Hughes, and he said, "I genuinely don't know what number might be needed because there's so many teams involved. You're all picking up points off each other, and it's a difficult one to judge. But I think 80 is probably a mark. It's a sort of if you can get to 80, you've got a fighter's chance. I would guess. So that's 6 wins and a draw, isn't it? And that's probably the minimum. So it's a tall order, but let's see what happens.
Can be done. What do you get the sense with Mark Hughes going into this run? Because obviously, such a big time player and he's managed clubs at the highest level. What do you gauge his kind of feeling is going into this running, and how do you expect him to handle that?
He seems very relaxed. You talk to him and he sort of makes jokes about I think he's enjoying it. When you think it's a bit weird because of course he's had his entire career bar half a season in the Premier League. I mean, in the half season he was down there with Blackburn. He went back up. So that's his only promotion campaign he's had because he's always played the top flight. So, I mean, this is a new thing for him as a manager. So I think he's enjoying the challenge. He obviously, when he came back into football originally took the Valley Parade job, it was very much a case of, I've been out of football for too long. I've not lost the bug. I want to get back into it. And straight away he was saying how much he enjoyed the waking up Saturday morning with something to really look forward to and, get his teeth into. And I think he's loving this as much as the supporters. He's obviously, his reputation's on the line as much as the club's, possibly more so. So, he doesn't want to fail. And I think when you've got a manager who's with that sort of experience and, an incredible CV like he has, you'd think it will give the players in the dressing room confidence, because this fella's played at the biggest arenas in the world, in front of huge crowds and huge occasions. So, if he can't pass on advice, then who can?
Yeah, absolutely. One sense you get from him as well is that he has really enjoyed it, his time at City. Like every time I've seen him speak or anything, he seems kind of really upbeat. Whereas I think possibly in his previous job, I know he had a break, didn't he? He kind of looked a little bit beaten down, I suppose, with it, because he'd had one job after another, and that break seems to have done him good. And then he's come back with all the enthusiasm, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, Premier League wise, when you manage a team like Man City and you end up at somewhere like Southampton, it's probably a little bit of a flat one. So I think he says impartially. So he probably needed a bit of a breather, didn't he? But yeah, it's a big challenge for him because, I mean, again, we always try and talk up City and we get knocked for it. But, the size of the club, it should not be at this level. It is, and it is for football reasons. And there's no argument with that. But in terms of the size of the stadium, size of the crowd, what have you, it should not be at this level. So, I think he enjoys the big fish in the small pond sort of scenario of taking this club. I can't imagine any other League Two team would have appealed to him in quite the same way. So, he's got that bit between his teeth, and I think he's enjoying being more hands-on. He often talks about, when we ask him about during the transfer window, things like that. How did you enjoy your mid-season window? And he likes looking at players, talking to targets face to face, seeing the whites of their eyes. He said, whereas in previous roles, he wouldn't get anywhere near a player half the time because it would go through layers and layers of other employees. There'd be a recruitment full departments who deal with this, that, and the other. And it sort of lost its personal touch. And I think he quite enjoys the, sort of the let's sit down and see what you're made of sort of conversations, which you don't get when you've got that many, that much bureaucracy around. But the one area obviously he doesn't enjoy is the refereeing. We had a conversation when he first started, actually, about, and I sort of said, have you seen League Two refs before? And he said, I've been told. And a couple of weeks in, I said, what do you think? He said, what they told me was right. He's tried to be careful, but obviously it's, there are some decisions that you look at and you think, yeah. And I think he sort of scratches his head and, the expressions he pulls, trying not to say what he really thinks, are very entertaining at press conferences. But it's, I think that's the one area that's probably shocked him a little bit more than others. But in general, going back to your original point, he's clearly enjoying it very much so.
Yeah, what was the game where I think Bradford City had a penalty shout and then literally up the other end, the other team got it straight away, and you were just like, hey, it's the same thing.
Crazy decisions, yeah.
Moving on to a bit of team news then. Adam Clayton out with an injury. Disappointing. What is that done for the season, is it? Or do we expect him to come back? Or
be a couple of weeks. I mean, he'll certainly miss obviously this weekend and Easter. So that's at least 3 games. After that, it just depends how he heals, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of, he is a loss because he's a vocal figure out there. He's a real sort of leader on the pitch. And I think they've only lost once when he's played. Obviously, people will then throw back the year, but they've had a lot of draws. But they look a stronger team with Adam Clayton in it. He's certainly given them a real backbone in that midfield, and he will be a miss. But there's plenty of competition. Obviously, you can go back to the original formation of Richie Smallwood and Alex Gilead sat in there in a 4-2-3-1, or you bring in Ryan East, Manny Asadabi's now back from his injury. And back in contention. So there are plenty of options there. So it's, people who sort of say, oh, you should change your team, give others a chance. Here's their opportunity because someone's going to come in and let's see them grasp it.
Yeah. How's the rest of the squad looking then, injury-wise, that kind of thing? Do you think it's going to be pretty much full squad ahead of Grimsby then, or?
It seems to be. Obviously, Abo Issa's still a bit longer term. and obviously you got Adam Clayton as well. But generally, you know, the likes of Matt Derbyshire coming back now, I think, all being well, I think they were nursing him through the early part of this week. So obviously, if he comes through, you know, training the next couple of days, then he'll be in contention for the weekend. And he, you know, his experience will be very useful at this stage. You saw what an impact he made in the short term when he came in previously. So yeah, I think there's plenty to choose from. You know, he's talked about big numbers on the training field again. So that's one area where they have got an advantage over some of the teams around them. You know, and in terms of the substitutions, you know, the players he can bring on, the quality he can bring on potentially, you know, he should put them in good stead for, you know, later on in games.
And it is Grimsby up next, and it should be quite a good atmosphere because they're bringing quite, I think, 2,000 fans out there that they're bringing, so it should be a cracking atmosphere.
Yeah, it always is. They always travel well over here, you know, and I think back to Stuart McCall's first game back for his third spell just before the pandemic, when you know, they brought, you know, a lot of, I think 2,500 they brought that day. And obviously when Luke Hendry scored in stoppage time for the equaliser, you know, and the atmosphere that day was cracking. And so, you know, the atmosphere over there is always a good one. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a good one. And it always makes for a better occasion, doesn't it? You know, because, you know, Grimsby arguably got nothing to play for in the sense of, you know, they're not going to get into playoffs this season, and they're well clear of being dragged into any trouble. Obviously, they've had a fantastic FA Cup run, you know, to sort of look back on. And so they can just go out and play. You know, they've got a lot of games to get through. He's been changing his team quite a bit. And they just go out and play. So it should, on paper, be a decent attacking game. And when you get that atmosphere, it just lifts the contest, doesn't it? And that will play, you know, hopefully should favour City a little bit, because that's what they want. You know, we've talked, you know, God knows how often about teams, you know, sitting back and sort of inviting City on and then just frustrating them. You know, and hopefully we won't have that this weekend. Hopefully we'll have an open contest, and, you know, that will give the opportunities, because as we keep saying, it's a game that they've got to win.
Yeah, absolutely. They did run a nice little unbeaten run, aren't they, Grimsby, as well? So like you say, it's going to be a
they've had a lot of draws though. Again, you know, they're a similar sort of run. But I think what's big about this weekend is the fact that obviously City are the only team not playing one around them. You know, up the top 7, the other 6 are all playing each other, which is a bit of an anomaly. But it's a great opportunity, because it does mean that if they get the win, and obviously that's the vital thing, they've got to win, then they will gain on, you know, certainly a couple of clubs.
Yeah.
Ideally, a couple of draws and Carlisle losing at Orient would be absolutely perfect. But even if you don't get that, you know, at worst case scenario, you're going to at least gain on 2 if you win your result on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we let you go, we did get a question in from Nick, actually, and this is going to test whether you're a bit of an optimist or pessimist. I think it says, do you think City can still finish in the playoffs? You would hope so, wouldn't you? Or possibly third still. So, I mean, if you had to put your hat on it, where do you think City are going to end up here, Simon?
Well, I hate to use the word certainly, but I'm pretty confident they're going to be in the top 7. I think they're going to be, you know, at least in the playoffs. And pre-season, I predicted they finished 3rd, and I can't go against my prediction, because, of course, I've got such a good record with the bookies. So I'm going to stick with, they've still got a fighter's chance of finishing 3rd, very much so. But, you know, I think, come back to me after Easter. I think after this Saturday and then the doubleheader or Easter it's a good sort of yardstick, because by that point, you know, games will be whittled away, and then you'll see very much whether they're in there or not. But there's no reason why they shouldn't be up there fighting. And yes, they can finish 3rd. Possibly.
Possibly, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. Well, if you've enjoyed the video today, please do put a like on the video. Also, subscribe to the channel for more Bradford City content, plus content on all our teams across the region as well. Simon, thank you very much for joining us today, mate, and we'll speak to you hopefully next week.
Cheers, Steve. Will do.
Thank you.